If more of you supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
Grimerica. The blah blah.
Sending out good vibes.
The blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
The blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
It implies that there was some golden age when everyone got along great and then things went badly. But the problem of that myth of the golden age is that it's indigenous peoples handing over the land to the settlers. So part of that golden age is about land.
Welcome back to the Grimerica Show. We are going to be chatting with Professor Dr. MacDonald a little bit later about his book, David MacDonald. About his book, Sleeping Giant Awakens. Graham is barely hanging on. Graham, I was almost a COVID hospitalization Dunlop.
No way.
Is back.
No way, dude. I did talk to the
cell.
doctor. I did talk to the doctor. I did. I made that doctor call. I just in case, you know.
Do you think that counts as a hospitalization?
I mean, yeah, me being at home with COVID counts as a hospitalization.
At the very least, you're a statistic.
100%.
100%. Foreign-born COVID brought into Canada.
Unvaccinated,
infected a multitude of people. Falls completely off the radar for a while. Families freaking out. Is that about it? That's about everything?
Remember my phone broke at
your phone was broken.
Everything was going crazy. Yeah.
You were questioning whether or not you were going to go to the hospital at one moment. You were at least lining up which hospital to go to. Should the situation arise.
I almost did go, yeah.
You text me and you're like, so if I was going to go to the hospital, where would I go? And I was like, well, I don't know. How are you? And then you just fucking silent. Nothing. I wake up to texts and emails from your family saying you just like dropped off in the middle of the night. So tell us about it. I mean, some people on Outlawed heard, but for the most part, the audience... You weren't on the last intro, I don't think, were you?
No, I don't think I was. No, you guys handled it yourself, which I really appreciate you and Kyle just taking the reins and doing, just covering for me. I really appreciate it. I mean, honestly, big thanks to everybody giving me, good vibes and shout out and all that. It's just, I really appreciate all the love and support I've had. I mean, it's been pretty good. I'm completely on the mend now. It's just a little bit. It's still a little weird, a little tired, a little bit shaky in a way.
Oh, you got another week at least.
No, but dude, it was getting pretty hairy for a while there. It was like I was in this weird astral. Honestly, dude, it was like trying to go to sleep at night. Remember, your advice was like, don't nap, because then I ended up all night, or trying to find a place to sleep all night. Because, like, remember, at the first I had all these body pains and shit. And I couldn't even, like, find rest, right? At all. And I'd go through these
I got like 10,000 milligrams of edibles in my safe.
There you go.
So I did not have that problem, which was probably, a bigger difference maker than we think.
Oh, yeah. Then I was going into these, like, weird astral... Honestly, these weird astral sort of battles with stuff, and I was coughing and having these weird sort of hallucinations and meeting these different people fighting these battles. Honestly, dude, it was insane.
It was a psychedelic experience.
It was a psychedelic experience, 100%. I felt like
just from lack of sleep, or from like lack of water, or like what do you think is all playing a role on your spiritual
It was a spiritual battle,
quest?
Dude. It was a fucking spiritual battle. It was a biohack. It was a fucking spiritual battle against the biohacking, like rummaging around in my fucking brain
say?
With sound waves. Like it was just like.
Kyle did mention that he said it felt very synthetic.
It was very synthetic. It's fucking weird, dude. I'm telling you. And we had like at some point these big ships that we had to like sort of make and disappear. Like it was a process of eliminating all these different weird battles. That was at the peak of it, and then it became very simplified afterward. I figured out how to just simplify the sleep, to simplify the battle, to simplify everything, and then it became now I'm starting to completely come back from it and heal from it. I know it's a very rambly way to do it, to talk about it, but it's been super crazy.
You still sound like shit. I feel like I sound normal. I don't think I talk. I'm stuck here all day by myself, right? Well, you've been stuck there all day by yourself for months. I mean, that's not new. I guess you have been narrating a lot.
Yeah, I was, but so it's still, I guess it's still there, but.
How do I pay you this month if you're just not doing anything?
It's just weird. It's just so weird, dude. I'm telling you, it's the weirdest fucking experience ever. And, luckily I feel like I'm
2 weeks
totally
down, eh? 2 weeks down.
Yeah.
Down. Fucking down. Maybe not fully honestly, down for 2 weeks, but for like 10 days, you were down, man.
Dude, I was to the point where, we were still doing shows and stuff. I've still hung in there to, like, you guys bailed me out of a big show. That was
just
fantastic.
Fucking dropped right out. You're just like,
I couldn't handle it anymore.
I just got the text. I was like, you're like, I'm gonna pass out. I gotta go. Bloop.
But I really appreciate that. But
I had some stuff going on too, so I had to leave for a couple of phone calls because
I was wondering. What was
that was right when the government found out that I had tested positive, so they were calling me over and over. And Kyle's just like, I thought you were both gonna go.
But anyways, honestly, dude, it's the hardest thing. I couldn't even type for a while. Like I can't even focus and type, make notes, or even text properly, or just do anything sort of like managerial or administratively. Like I could not even focus on a fucking thing. Like it's the weirdest, just lethargy, tired, like just I couldn't even watch anything on TV. I did nothing. Like I couldn't even read books for the show. I couldn't even watch TV for things. I couldn't even do anything. It was just nothing. It was just try and sleep. But then, like you said, if you sleep all day long, then the nighttime is the weirdest fucking thing. I can't, because then I'm up in the middle of the night on all these different rooms of the house trying to figure out how I'm going to sleep. And
I had a couple projects on the go, kept me busy. I don't think I lost my voice at all, unless I just didn't notice.
It was a little scratchy at one point.
My experience was much different because you were sick already Monday. You were kind of sick in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
Not terrible.
And then I was okay for a while, and then
yeah, I mean, you were better than me in the beginning because I missed the Tuesday I missed the Wednesday show.
Yeah,
we were both fine for the Tuesday night show, I think. And then the Wednesday night show, I didn't show up for. I bailed out. Tuesday night was the night I started getting sick.
Yeah, but that was it. Just one night for you.
Middle of the night, Tuesday, I woke up 3 a.m, super hot, super sweaty, fever and hard. I was like, oh, fuck, okay, here we go.
Yeah, but I think that's what it did. Your natural body, besides all the THC and all that, your natural body handled it all, did it properly with a fever, and it got rid of it right away. That's kind of why I stopped taking some stuff after you had done that. I'm like, oh man, all the stuff I've been taking, maybe I should just back off of it.
Just fucking. So I was like Tuesday, Wednesday. So that was Tuesday night, 3 a.m. Then I woke up Tuesday. I was in pretty rough shape. I still got myself outside for a couple hours, maybe an hour and a half of pressure washing paint off the deck at least. And then Wednesday night, I was just like falling asleep again. So Kyle sat in to do the fluoride show. And then I was like out from that because like I didn't know how long the show was or anything. I think I got up around 11:30 p.m. And Kyle's like, I just left everything on. So I came down, shut everything off. And then by the next morning, I was mostly bounced back. Not 100% though. It lingered. It definitely lingered, like a quiet sort of weird lag. Because it was still even from then, it was probably another like 2 or 3 days before I was feeling like I was editing audiobooks again and starting to get back into the groove. But even then, it was like you said, I'd edit for an hour and it felt like a lot.
Exactly.
Whereas before
exactly.
I'd do 6 hours straight, you know?
Yeah, sometimes I'd look at these podcasts and I'd be like, "Oh my god!"
But it's from not
only
eating
a half
food.
hour have gone.
When like I can really equate it to the lack of food I've been eating for the last couple of weeks, and I'm still having trouble. You know, like tonight for dinner, I just had a piece of pizza. It was a big piece of pizza, but one piece of pizza, and I'm like done. You know,
Yeah,
and that's mostly what I've eaten all day because I find myself really needing to force
100%.
the food in. But
100%.
tomorrow is going to be a new day because I got to get up in the morning and I'm after it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I've been allowed out for a while, been out a few times, but I haven't really done much. I ran to the store a couple of times and I ran Kyle to the airport. But tomorrow I'll be up and out of the house for a good 6 hours.
Yeah, good.
And that'll be good to get me back into the groove of eating proper. I've cut down on my coffee, so I'm gonna try.
Oh, me too.
Like,
I don't even
keep
coffee. Like I can't even have more than a half a cup.
I'm gonna try and keep that trend going tomorrow.
Something weird.
I'd like to get down to
coffee.
2 cups of coffee a day.
Yeah, I just can't even eat that either. I bought those boosters. Basically, I've been eating those like protein booster shakes.
Have you left the house yet?
Yep.
Where'd you go?
I had to go to Shoppers.
So you're outing?
That was
Did it
my
feel
outing
weird to be out?
once. Oh yeah, fuck, it was weird.
Kyle's first day out,
he
he walked all the way to your house.
to my house. Really?
Yeah, he walked to your house, rang the doorbell a couple times.
Wow.
Called me. He's like, he's not answering. I don't know. He's like, I'm just gonna leave the shit on the step here. So we thought for sure you were gone to the hospital.
No. No, the doctor did question me on why I stopped taking
We
the
left the
vitamin
phone
D.
at your place.
So it's weird, eh? Like it's weird. The doctor's like, so what have you been taking for all this? I'm like, well, according to you guys, I shouldn't be taking fucking anything right now. If it was
waiting to die
because of my own initiative, like, I mean, I guess because I don't have my own family doctor, I shouldn't really be critical of people. I mean, maybe they do have family doctors. The family doctors would be giving them this advice. But I told him, I've been like, okay, well, I was doing zinc and quercetin and vitamin C and vitamin D. And he's like, well, why did you stop the vitamin D? And I'm like, well, I just stopped everything for a while. I told him. And he's like, well, you should stay on that.
Just
So
the vitamin D?
I kind of and everything and the vitamin C and D. So I've kept everything. I've kept the regimen ramped up since talking to him a couple days ago. A few days ago now, so I've been pretty.
That's
pretty
a
good.
doctor?
Yeah, doctor, yeah.
Not like a naturopath or something. They just
No.
kind of assigned you a doctor.
No, I asked him. I slipped in ivermectin, and he's like, "Oh no, we can't. We don't have approval to do all that." Yeah,
Plugged his ears.
yeah.
Wow. I did.
But it is weird though how they're how come I'm not officially given a protocol of
Well, if you had a
vitamins and
family
minerals?
doctor, you might be.
Yeah, maybe
It
you're
can't
right,
all
but-
be based on the emergency system.
right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's up to us, I think, to have someone to call. I mean, my
Yeah.
doctor's a fucking idiot. There's no way he'd have any. I couldn't imagine what he would have to say. But if I said, well, I think they've like made it hard to do the ivermectin. But if I told my doctor to give me shit, he's usually pretty good at just doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, to a fault, to a point where I could just like go in before and say, "Give me some Percocets," and he'd be like, "How many?"
Oh my god.
Right? It's a good thing I was never a pill guy.
Yeah.
But I remember I'd always have a jar of Percocets in the thing when I was like partying, just because they could have great for a hangover, especially if you gotta go work. Anyway, I digress. I didn't do any vitamins. I did them. I did them a couple times down in the States. Maybe they were working. I was fighting it off because I did test negative twice. And then after I was sick the one day, the next morning I took the vitamins. And they just fucking hit me like a ton of bricks in the gut.
Yeah.
Man. I took like fucking thousands of milligrams of shit. Like 3,000 of the vitamin C with this, and then another one of the vitamin C with the D and the Lopo fucking whatever. And like fucking 30 minutes later, my guts are just rotten. And I'm just like, oh, fucking never again.
Yeah.
So I didn't take any more vitamins. I'm off the vitamins again. I do take my B12. And then I just started, I knew the sleep thing was going to be a thing. When it got real bad, I can't remember if it was Kale or my buddy Rico that told me they had heard to sleep on your stomach if it gets real bad. So I tried that. The one night seemed to help, but it was really the hundreds and hundreds of milligrams of THC I was taking a couple hours before bed. I mean, it really is just like, maybe it's bad. Maybe it's like sleeping pills, but like if I go eat a couple 100 milligrams right now by fucking 11:15, man, there's no chance I can keep my eyes open. I'm like crawling up the stairs. I think there's probably a dehydration factor. It's hard to drink enough water.
Yeah, I've just been.
I'm just
so
like
much
rolling
water,
around
too.
my house like a fucking slug. Honestly, is what it's starting to feel like.
Yeah.
I cannot fucking wait to get out of here and go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. It's. I'm still a little sluggish for sure.
I'm not ready to. I mean, if there's anything this has taught me, I'm not ready to retire. With my kids being as young as they are, the way I'm sort of tied to a schedule and a routine, and I can't just go off to the States for months on end, which would kind of be a thing I'd probably do right now. If I was you, I'd strongly be considering just fucking hopping in my car. Well, I guess you can't, but, just going on a fucking 3-month road trip to the States for the winter and getting the fuck out of here. But I can't do that. And I've realized now in the last 2 weeks that if I have to stay here, I'll go fucking crazy. Like legitimately fucking crazy. It was a long fucking 14 days of not leaving my house. And I even had like Kyle here doing the deck, doing things. I've got a huge fucking support network online of people I can sort of just reach out at any time of day and start talking to someone really if I want it.
Yeah.
And it still just fucking drove me up the fucking wall to the point that I didn't even finish all the little projects I thought I'd get done. My basement's not quite clean. I didn't fucking touch my garage because I just fell into like slug mode. Watched more TV in the last 2 weeks than I fucking watched in the last fucking year and a half. Just because fucking there was nothing to do.
Yeah.
For hours and hours. And it's like you sleep as late as you can. It's like 8.
Oh, I know, dude. I'm telling you, and there's just no interest level for me on anything.
I found 6 season of Meat Eater online on YouTube that I watched. So I watched fucking maybe fucking 70 hours of YouTube in the last couple of weeks, and a couple entire fucking series on Netflix. I can't watch anything. The only thing I can watch that doesn't drive me crazy is like the little competition type things. So the one I watched, there was a bunch of people making stuff out of metal. So who could make the coolest sculpture, and someone gets eliminated every week. And then another one where people were making stuff out of glass, which is fucking insane to me. I want to blow glass. I mean, if I can get a bunch of money squirreled away so I could have all this crazy stuff to do all day, like fucking Tuesday's glass blowing day and fucking, then I could do it. But I mean, holy fuck, bro. Either that or, I mean, I don't know what I'd do. I think I'd like succumb into like shopping or something. You know what I mean? Like there's a real, something bad's going to happen there. There's a real, if I can't travel or do something, there's a real dangerous slip.
Well, it's a good thing we got 3 fucking podcasts and books and,
That's not enough for me though. You know what I mean? It wouldn't quite be enough.
Yeah.
I guess it could be when you're going like hard on the books, and we could be doing more interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I am like itching to get back to my daily problem solving.
Yeah, exactly.
Existence. And
did you watch Chappelle's the Chappelle comedy at all?
I watched like a quarter of it. I honestly,
really?
I just
didn't get through it.
No, I didn't. It's not. It's and then I think I didn't consider watching it until the kids were already here. And then I think one of the kids came in. It was like 2 days ago, maybe. I started watching it. It seems funny. I guess. I mean, honestly, I just don't give a fuck, man. I don't. It
was pretty good.
I know there's a bunch of hoopla about it already, and I don't like where we're at these days. I remember, like, it wasn't that long ago where you just come across this, or maybe everyone would sort of be talking about it, but it's like fucking everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like my phone on 5 different things, and it's, you know, all over the place on Twitter. It's on this. I'm getting fucking emails, not even from listeners, just like generic fucking emails about it. And it's just like the whole pulp culture thing is just overwhelming. It's probably because I've also spent more time on my fucking phone in the last 2 weeks, which is ironic. I mean, because of a very phone-centric day job.
Yeah.
But it was at least focused phone-centric things, not just fucking killing time.
Yeah.
Literally killing time. I mean, I don't know how the fuck somebody hasn't left their house in a year and a half. I mean, I don't know what these fucking people are doing. I don't know what they're doing. Drugs, probably.
Well, some people, it depends. Where everybody's different, man. We're all at different spots. You know,
I would
I'm more
slowly
comfortable
slip into
home.
a drug addiction if I was stuck in my home
I'm
for a
more
couple months.
comfortable at home now than I've ever been in my life, right? Like ever.
You're hallucinating about fucking a spiritual war with elves, bro.
I love my home. Dude, yeah, we were battling it. We were battling against the fucking billions of Chinese, man.
So even after CAC?
What?
Even after a CAC coming from that, you're like, give me my house and my solitude?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. It was a weird CAC with the COVID. Made it weird.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that, like, you know, I've made a home that I love with a woman that I love, that for the first time ever where it's that comfortable, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So I like it. I appreciate it now more than ever.
Is the woman back yet?
What?
Is the woman back yet?
No, she's still over there. So.
Well, I guess we won't keep you too long. I mean, I got
a quote here. I got a quote here for you.
All right, go ahead.
A long time ago, before the residential school issue came up, an elder told me to go back to my community because there was a sleeping giant, and I had to go and wake it up gently. I thought he meant the elders. But when the residential school issue came up, I knew what he was talking about. He said that when the truth came out, it would reverberate throughout the world. I was a speaker at an Aboriginal Healing Foundation gathering in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Is that from our guest?
That's from his book, yeah.
Nice one. So I guess before we jump into the show, I guess the question is, do you wish you got the shot?
Mm-mm.
No?
No fucking way. Are you kidding me, dude?
Would you recommend it for anyone still, no? I mean, okay, I was pretty surprised to see you fucking as taken down as you were and on the brink of hospitalization.
I wasn't on the brink.
Dude, I have the text on my phone. I have the text on my phone. If I go to the hospital, should I just drive to the Strathmore one? And I was like, you should call 911. I don't think they want you just driving into the fucking falling on the horn. So yeah, I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, no, dude, no way.
And for a long time, a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
Kyle had it here. He didn't even know.
I know.
Super spreader bastard. Vaccinated. Double vaxxed.
Yeah.
Double vaccinated super spreader.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyways, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm on the mend.
You're on the mend now. I mean, you seem like you're up, you're moving around, you're less pale.
Had a big podcast day today. Had an awesome show, a couple
you have
shows
your shirt
today.
on.
Yeah.
You're wearing clothes again.
Wearing clothes again.
I mean, things are looking up. Well, all right. Grimerica.ca/support if you want to help Graham keep on the mend and keep that. We do have to keep the cash flow, keep the pay going. He does live full time off the podcast and the audiobooks and all that stuff now. Grimerica.ca/support. If you can sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation, we would love you for it. Check out GrimericaOutlawed.ca. We got ISIS Unveiled out over on the audiobook stuff. People seem to be loving that so far.
That was a really good one. Yeah,
It's
one of my
not
favorites.
on Adult Brain yet. I didn't update the website. I got to get to that yet. But it is on Audible and iTunes and every place else. So is the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle one, Through the Magic Door. And that Religion of the Chinese should come out one day this week. So grab all that stuff, and that's another great way to support the show. Other than that, enjoy the wonderful chat with Dr. Professor David MacDonald.
Dr. David MacDonald, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I thought we'd maybe just start off just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we can start getting into the topic of your awesome book. And
yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan. I was basically raised there, and then I went to university in Ottawa, and then to the UK after that to do my PhD. My mom's from Trinidad, so she's Indian from Trinidad. They were indentured laborers brought over to cut sugar cane, and my dad's family's from Scotland originally, but they went out to the Maritimes during the Highland clearances, so they've been in Canada for a long time. So I sort of come from a multicultural background, and Regina, as you may know, was quite a divided city growing up, as I outline in the book, with a lot of divisions between Indigenous peoples and basically everybody else. So, you know, there was a lot of different kinds of racism growing up, but also, you know, within my own family as well, because you see that as part of the immigrant experience sometimes is manifesting negative feelings towards Indigenous peoples as part of the process of fitting in. So that's what kind of got me interested, I guess, in some of these topics. My wife's from New Zealand, and so I worked at the University of Otago, which is in the South Island of New Zealand, for quite a while, until 2007, and then got a job at the University of Guelph in the political science department in 2007. And I've been there ever since. So it's a good university and a very friendly department. So it's been good.
wow, yeah. My girlfriend lives in Saskatchewan, and you know, I think there's still some issues there. You know, in Saskatchewan, it's still a challenging. There's still some racism lingering around, and
yeah. I think for sure. I did a couple of publications looking at the killing of Colton Bushy and the trial of Gerald Stanley. So, part of the research for that, I'd written a piece for the Conversation, that online media platform that academics often use, and I got, I don't know how many comments it was, but I had a PhD. It was very much critical of the trial that Stanley basically got off without, you know, even manslaughter. And I had a PhD student of mine download all the comments, and there were 400 pages of negative comments about the article, which I then decided to analyze. And it was pretty bad. Like the racism towards you know, Colton and his family and the community was pretty surprising. I mean, I'd seen a lot of stuff, but it's definitely still there. There's no doubt.
Wow. Can you get into that a little bit? And for people that don't know
sure.
what that case is, it's probably worth talking about.
Yeah. So a young Cree man from the I believe it was the Red Pheasant Reserve up in Saskatchewan was basically out hanging around with his friends. They're driving around. They got a flat tire, and they drove into this farm, basically looking to get some help. And Gerald Stanley was a farmer. He had like a repair business, fixing cars and stuff like that. So these guys got out. A couple of them, they had all been drinking a bit too much, so they were. One of them had got on a kind of a quad bike, and this Stanley, the father and the son, basically thought these guys were there to steal everything. And so one of them took a hammer to the windshield and the taillight of the car that Colton's friends were driving. Gerald Stanley went and got it was like a Soviet-made or Czech-made handgun, and basically, eventually, ended up shooting this guy Colton Bushy in the head while he was asleep in the vehicle. So the police eventually came and they took this guy away, but and he stood trial sometime later. But the options were it was second degree murder, first degree murder, it was second degree murder and manslaughter, I think, and because it wasn't premeditated. But they found him basically not guilty of the two counts, including manslaughter, which seemed to be pretty crazy because he was basically fooling around with a loaded gun. He claimed that he thought all the bullets had been discharged from the gun. He fired a couple warning shots to scare off Colton's friends, and they basically fled from the farm. So the defense claimed it was what's called a hang fire. Basically, when you pull the trigger and it takes a few seconds or more before the bullet exits the chamber of the gun, and so in that case, the defense argued that it was a hang fire, although it would have been a very long one. I think about a 30-second hang fire. They did tests on the gun. There was absolutely no proof that there was anything mechanically wrong with the Tokarev pistol. So this provoked a whole lot of obviously a lot of anger and outrage amongst Indigenous communities and their supporters. But a lot of the white farming population felt that this was what should have been done. That it was right to acquit Stanley. That these guys shouldn't have been on the farm to begin with. That they basically deserved what they got. So it became incredibly polarizing, and still is a very polarizing issue.
When did you write that?
I think the Conversation article was 2018.
Yeah,
and then I did an academic article which came out last year, and I knew some people who knew the family, some Indigenous scholars, and they were able to help me kind of get in touch with the family, basically, and they, to ensure that I was doing things in a way that was respectful. So, and a lot of the work that I do, that's really important, not to do things that are done in an appropriate way.
That's why I think this whole, like your book, the Sleeping Giant Awakens. Let me just get the Sleeping Giant Awakens. And this whole residential school thing is such an important thing right now, because it's still, people don't realize it, and just regular people just don't really realize. They don't have an accurate picture of history and what happened, and they're still stuck in this paradigm where, they think that the land has been given to the natives, and it's just the context is all off.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was trying to do in the book, is to outline a lot of the context so that we know why, we know where we are right now, and we know, we got a good idea how we got there. Because, and those are the two aspects of truth, I guess, is that there's a lot of things that are happening now you don't know about from the media or elsewhere. And then even if you find out about them, you have a tendency to blame the person who's there, and not to actually look at the historical background behind it. So that's what I was trying to do in this book, is to do some of that. I also noticed too, there, and I still find this is true, there's very, very few books about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 6 years later, like how many books just, use the TRC's work, or have many chapters about how the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was set up and what it did. I mean, that was another focus of my book. And there's actually not many books. There's maybe a handful of them that look at the TRC and analyze it and what it did and what it was trying to do. And I find that surprising, because it's had a big impact with some of its recommendations, but to actually study the TRC, it hasn't been done that much.
Yeah, there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of public domain material there. I mean, I've started digging into it a little bit, but I mean, it's just so much to go through. It's like there's a lot.
Yeah,
but it is a great resource. It is. I used a bit of it in my book, but it is a great resource. So, what? I guess you've been at this for a little while. What was sort of can you sort of take us through not without giving away too much, sort of take us through a little overview of the book?
Yeah. So basically I kind of start from the question of, is this genocide or not? I started being interested in this topic because I was looking at, my PhD was on the wars in Yugoslavia, and the Serbs and the Croats both basically said we're victims of genocide, and the other side has tried to destroy us. So I kind of started looking at, I guess you'd call it some propaganda on the Serb and Croat sides, and I became interested in looking at how different groups of people, whether they're or victims of genocide or not, were using discussions of genocide sometimes as a political strategy. And I did my PhD in the UK, and I was teaching in France and New Zealand for a while. I hadn't lived in Canada for quite a while, so a lot of the case studies I was looking at were other groups of people like the Armenians and the Roma and Sinti, or Gypsies, I guess you'd call them, and various other groups who were making claim, who were victims of genocide, and the kinds of imageries and things that they were using. So the book basically kind of started out by me wanting to know, what sort of claims of genocide were being made by Indigenous peoples, and then whether they had any validity or not. It also became interesting for me to talk to a lot of survivors about the issue of genocide. So I did a lot of research talking with survivors, mainly up in Sault Ste. Marie, about their experiences and whether they thought the Genocide Convention applied, and pretty much all of them did, and they described some experiences which were pretty horrible. It was around that time that the TRC started getting its work done, so I started following their work quite a bit, going to the national events and things like that, and so I became kind of interested in putting these pieces together, like what is the TRC doing? And a lot of the survivors at the TRC events were talking about genocide as well. So, and there were a lot of people who were saying, "Well, it's not genocide; it doesn't count." And a lot of Indigenous people were writing books saying, "Yes, it is." So there was clearly some kind of debate about what was going on, and the TRC was tackling these questions. So the book basically looks at what is genocide, how the TRC dealt with the question, and then if we say it's genocide, which I did, what evidence do we have to make that case? And what kind of genocide is it? And then if it is genocide, what do we do about it? Like, how does that affect the reconciliation process? And I basically make the argument there's sort of like two kinds of genocide. There's one that's in international law. So there's like a UN convention that was passed in 1948, which lays out in international law what genocide is. And then there's a lot of sociological definitions. So academics have basically looked at the convention, say there's areas that should be covered by the law but aren't. for various reasons that I outline in the book. And so I use two different models of understanding genocide to then look at the residential schools and make the argument that it is. I then look at the 60s scoop as well. And then from there move on to make some recommendations.
Do you feel like when I was reading your book, I kind of felt like the whole genocide, like whether it was cultural genocide or the traditional type of genocide, I mean, I felt like that whole thing, the trying to define it, not from your perspective, but from like a legal perspective from the UN, or I felt like it kind of almost held up reconciliation or like stalled it all. I mean, if they're so focused on whether or not it was genocide, like I felt like that sort of almost slowed it down.
I mean, that's not an uncommon argument. There's a well-known historian of the residential schools, Jim Miller, and he and I were friends for many years, but I don't know. We have a big disagreement about the issue of genocide, and that's his argument. Basically, that if you start looking at genocide too much, it pokes a stick in reconciliation processes. It makes the settler side of the equation uncomfortable, unhappy.
Oh, right, and you address some of that.
It leaves a bad taste in their mouths, and so it makes reconciliation harder. But the question is, is it genocide or not? Like, and if it is, then maybe we're at the truth stage right now, or and it's not like there's one piece. I mean, there's like, there's over 30 million people in Canada, and everyone's got their own idea of what reconciliation is and what they want to do or not do about it. And there's also going to be 30 million or so views about what the truth is, and so we're all going to have our own particular views, and we're going to try to arrive at what we think are the right solutions to that. So, yeah, it may get in the way of some people's idea of what truth and reconciliation is. If you think it's not genocide, then saying it is going to get in the way of reconciliation. If you do think it's genocide, then denying that it's genocide is going to get in the way of reconciliation. So it's it's a matter of perspective, I guess, is how I'd put it that way. And I think that, for me, this is less about reconciliation and more about the truth stage. Is like, what are we dealing with here in terms of Canadian history? Like, and I think the book is more timely now too, because like, as I was launching the book, we have the National Inquiry on Murder and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. And so, I get people pushing back on the book, but really they're also pushing back on that national inquiry. And so the question of genocide is bigger than a book, and it's bigger than the inquiry. I mean, the Canadian Historians Association, they passed a declaration or statement saying that they recognize the residential schools as genocide. And that had a lot of pushback from other historians as well. So I don't know. I think maybe it stops some kinds of reconciliation, but it could be opening the door to deeper forms, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's better to go with the closest to the truth as we can with this stuff. I mean,
Yeah. It's like if someone steals your car and you want the car back, but they refuse to admit that they've taken it. They call it something else. I mean, it's for a lot of people, the genocide label fits, and to say less is not good enough. I mean, I talked to people who were supportive of the there was like a recognition bill or statement. I'm not sure what it was called, but Leah Gazan, an NDP MP from Winnipeg, earlier this year introduced a resolution. I think it was called a non-binding resolution to the federal parliament to recognize the residential schools as genocide. And there was some pushback about that. And I was talking to someone who was helping her out. And I was saying something to the effect of, well, I guess you could try for cultural genocide, because that would, that might be the middle ground. But you see, that wouldn't necessarily satisfy people that believe it to be genocide. They would think that's a watered down sort of second class kind of a finding. in terms of recognition.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of why you come to the conclusion of genocide?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so if you look at Article 2E of the Genocide Convention, it's about intentionally, forcibly transferring children from one group to another group. So, I mean, you can look at the acts of the RCMP, the Indian agents, whoever, taking the kids away. You can also look at the coercion, parents being threatened, or grandparents that they don't take the kids or grandkids or the kids under their care to residential schools. They could go to prison. If you look at legislation like the 1920 Amendment to the Indian Act, which makes it compulsory for status Indigenous kids to go to some form of schooling, but at the same time, they're also closing the day schools and the schools on reserve and amalgamating these into the residential schools, which are further away. Then you get all sorts of all sorts of evidence of that. You also have, and this is how I structure the book, but the high levels of abuse in the school are also in a way designed to prevent the child from going back to the life that he or she had before going into the school. So you're basically, you're transferring the kids away from something. And the way that the law on genocide works is it a question of, are they being transferred to something else? Well, not necessarily, but they're being transferred away from. And the lives that they had, the languages that they spoke, the spiritual practices that they had, their ties to their families, all that stuff gets severed. And, for those who try to get it back, it's incredibly difficult in many cases. I mean, some cases maybe not, but in many cases it is.
Yeah, banning the language and teaching English, I would say, or French is a pretty clear example of taking the children and changing their culture. Yeah.
Well, especially for Indigenous peoples, like our culture is so heavily tied with the language, like the stories and everything else if you don't have the language, you lose a lot of the meanings in the stories.
Oh, that's
or
a
the
good
teachings.
point. Yeah.
It
changes the whole spiritual, it changes the whole spiritual context.
It kind of goes into the whole George Orwell, out of, I think it's 1984, with the new speak and the old speak. You get rid of the old speak, and that by taking the language away, it kind of does that. So we don't understand what the stories were and what they're trying to teach us.
A lot of the survivors too talked about skin color. So they were taught that their skin color was dirty. And so you see this kind of trying to, like, a number of survivors talked about how they tried to scrub off their skin color so they could be white, or they talked about how the teachers would prioritize the lighter skinned kids. So there are a lot of politics of colorism, I guess you could say, and that would continue after the residential schools as well. And so, different people like Howard Adams in his book, The Prisoner of Grass, I think it's called, talks about how he had a lighter skin color and managed to do better in life than people with darker skin. And so these kinds of things become part and parcel of that as well, causing people to judge themselves, to try to change themselves, to try to fit into a society they don't think is going to necessarily accept them as they are. So, so those are some of the themes that I look at in the book.
Yeah, I think that the lighter skin one is interesting because my great grandmother was a residential school survivor, and she was lighter skinned and lighter haired, and she never once had anything negative to say about her experience. She just had nothing good to say about it. So now I always wondered why that was, and maybe potentially that could be the case.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, a lot of people, and this is why the TRC was interesting too. I mean, they never told the kids anything negative about the residential schools until they went to the TRC, and some of them would give testimony and really horrible stuff. But so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe things were bad too, and she just didn't want to talk about it. But but maybe the skin color was important. So many very very strange things that happened in those schools that we'll probably never know about.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, I'd like to know what your opinion is on the actual TRC recommendations and who are they really for? Like who are they really meant to benefit? Because and now I'm saying this from the perspective of a Mohawk who's pretty much lived on the reserve in Ganawage in Quebec majority of my life and spent most of my time, my professional career in economic development on reserve. And at least some of the recommendations that I find, like for instance, of like any major event that we have, you have to say which tribal land you're on, that or whose nation's land you're on, and recognize that. But from someone on reserve on working in economic development, that really has no impact on any of us. That does not necessarily address the fact that 41% of our 18 to 24-year-olds are unemployed.
Yeah.
Or we have a 24% high school dropout rate. So all these other issues, by doing that does not address these other issues.
No, I agree. I think a lot of the recommendations are good. Do they go far enough? Probably not. I think only maybe 10 or 12 out of the 94, and the 94, and then there's like sub recommendations have been successfully met by the government anyway. So it becomes difficult to know what the world would look like if all the recommendations were implemented. So I think there are some recommendations that deal with things like land back and Indigenous law and restoring languages. One of them, and I can't remember the number now, I think maybe there's 3 of them now, but it dealt with creating this kind of national like oversight body that would be independent to monitor the status of reconciliation or monitor the status of the recommendations. And none of the Trudeau government has not really done anything about that. So half the time we don't even know what's going on with the recommendations, whether they're going to do anything with them or not. So, I think if the recommendations are all carried out, I think it's a good start. But what I'm seeing is that maybe only 10% of them have been carried out. So we're not at a good start, and we're not even really trying as a country to implement these things. So, but they don't include everything, and they're not going to address the problems that you're looking at. I mean, they might go some way towards helping out, but I don't know. What do you think? What's your impression of them?
Well, not knowing them all in detail, I've just recently started really looking into this. I find at least some of the more popular ones that most people know about, or I'll even give the latest example of, in 2 days, we're going to have the first Truth and Reconciliation Day.
Not if you're still in Alberta, you're not.
Oh, okay. But the fact is that, once again, that's kind of like the last issue of who is it really meant to benefit? Like it doesn't really address the issue on the ground of what the cause, not necessarily, okay, we kind of know what the cause is of the residential schools, but the long-term generational impacts that are occurring, throughout both on reserve and off reserve with the survivors and their children, and the differences in the livelihood. I mean, even for myself, living just a few kilometers outside of downtown Montreal in my home, we still don't have clean drinking water. Every other municipality around us has it, but nothing in the TRC, I think, really addresses that. So that's kind of my opinion. It's like we were acknowledging it, but a lot of things seem to make it more for the government to say, look, we actually did something.
It's more to say that you're doing something about the UN resolution, if you ask me. I mean, they're kind of designed to sort of tick all of those off. Let's make sure that we've got a plan for all of the things on this UN declaration that we first said no to, and then everyone freaked the fuck out. So we had to say yes. So they have to address that somehow. How do you address that? You come up with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who then comes out with these 94 points, which conveniently cover everything in the UN resolution. So now that can kind of quietly go away as being dealt with. And that's sort of my take on it. Whether or not we'll ever see the 94 resolutions get done, I do think that would be a good start. Whether or not we'll see those get done, I think drinking water is more important. I think it's terrible that Trudeau again, has to promise drinking water again, and he's sent about $24 billion overseas in foreign aid since he started in 2017 or 2015, by my count. Not to mention, money spent fighting residential school survivors, money sent to Africa for COVID. Vaccines bought to sit on shelves, everything. There's money for everything except for that. And the nerve that he'd have to run on that again is just sort of disgusting. But in my estimation, that's what the TNR report is for, so that you have at least the appearance of dealing with the UN resolution.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the sequence of events there, because a lot of the TRC, like the settlement agreement and stuff, happened before the UN declaration was passed in 2007. And from what I understand, I mean, the Harper government was pretty unhappy with the UN declaration. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. Like the TRC, they were keen to promote the declaration, and it does deal with things like drinking water and stuff probably better than the TRC recommendations themselves. So I think the point of that declaration is that you've got an international standard, and you can use that to judge what the Canadian government is or is not doing.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think 2008 is when the TNR starts, which is after that. Or the TRC starts after the report. So the TRC is then made to come out with its recommendations that deal with that report.
Yeah, well, I think you get a promotion of the declaration because Chief Littlechild was very active in the UN system and helped to put together the declaration. So, I think it and that does become a good standard for how the government should treat Indigenous peoples. So I don't.
I agree with that.
As a positive. Yeah,
I agree with that for the UN report. I agree with that 100%. Now, my point is more that the TNR report or the TRC recommendations, the TRC recommendations are to make it seem like the Canadian government has dealt with or is actively dealing with the UN report, the UN declaration. It sort of gives the entire general public that the Canadian government is actively dealing with this UN thing by this TRC commission. They've got all these recommendations, when meanwhile in the background nothing's really happening other than the stuff that was sort of in motion already. And like you say, we're lucky if we're at 10%.
Yeah. So I guess it'll boil down to like your assumptions about who was controlling the TRC. So my sense of it, and I did a lot of activities with them. I briefly worked for them because I thought they were doing good work, not because. So my sense of it was that they were pretty independent from the government. I mean, they took the government to court a few times to get information released. There were all these lawsuits and stuff because the government wasn't releasing information. The churches weren't releasing information. Once they started talking about genocide publicly, like Murray Sinclair, the access to information started drying up even more. So I don't. My sense is that the TRC wasn't really working that well with the government. I mean, there were people from Indian Affairs that were, seconded to the TRC, but I mean, this was survivor money. Most of it was running on survivor money. They had a council of survivors who day to day, we're helping out the TRC in terms of where it should be going, what it should be doing. So I mean, I've heard lots of people think that the TRC was controlled by the Harper government, but that wasn't my impression. So I don't know if that's what you're suggesting or not, but.
Well, I don't blame the Harper government at all. I mean, I think they're all in bed together. I mean, I don't think there's a difference between the Trudeau Liberals or the Harper Conservatives or I mean, I guess we'll see if we see change over the next 10 or 15 years. Maybe I can be convinced to sort of come over to your side of the field. But from my side, it just seems like another whitewash. It seems like another, I mean, in some ways, that's what we're seeing with these unmarked graves again, right? Trudeau can have a teddy bear and we can do this and that, but no one's actually held accountable. We can't even get an actual fucking apology. And it gets frustrating. I mean, you look at the 60 Scoop, for example, where they get $40,000, or most of them are getting less than 20, but the law firms get 18.75 million each. I mean, it's craziness.
Yeah.
And I mean, what does the apology and the $20,000 also comes with the caveat of you signing away your rights for future this or that, right? It's again, I would argue, this needs to be dealt with now so that we're not dealing with it anymore in 10 years.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, my point is not that I'm pretty critical of the Trudeau government in the book too. I mean, they're different in the sense that they've got slightly different support bases. And so they'll play to their support bases. And so they'll say different things because their support bases want to hear different things. And they'll come up with slightly different policies because their bases want slightly different policies. But at the end of the day, they're similar. I mean, they're both parties that helped found the country and keep it going. And both the Liberals and Conservatives were in government during the residential school and the 60s Scoop. So, there's a lot of continuity there. I was just reading a book on Mackenzie King, and I mean, he was a nasty piece of work. And I don't know that Wilfrid Laurier was as wonderful, as people say. Was he way better than Johnny MacDonald? I don't know. I think in part of the issue of the statues, and we could talk about that if you like. They're going after the Conservatives, who are demonstrably worse, but the early Liberals were not great either. So that's something that. Those are some pieces of the historical puzzle that haven't really come out a lot quite yet.
What about the actual, like, I've heard that some of the indigenous peoples that were watching some of these apologies were pretty upset that they weren't addressing like the killings or people actually dying, and was the TRC. Did they not approach that? And maybe that has something to do with why the genocide was harder to define, because you hear from some people that thousands of kids died, and I don't know if that's really ever been properly approached officially.
I guess it depends how you define properly. Like the TRC did have a missing children volume, and I think they gave some estimates of, I can't remember now, maybe 4,500 children who had died or gone missing. Now, they had a few problems, and one of the problems was finance. They went to the government, the Harper government, and asked for more money, and they were told this wasn't part of the original mandate of the TRC, so you're not going to get any more money. So they knew there were more bodies to be found. They had a good idea where they could find them, and they knew who they could hire to find those bodies, but they didn't have the money to do it. And so that was part of the problem.
Did they mention that in the report?
I think so, yeah. I think it was mentioned in the report. It's certainly been mentioned in statements by the commissioners after the fact. I've got it in my book as well. You could have a look, and I'm not sure where all the footnotes will lead you, but you could have a look and see. I mean, the other thing too is that they had to have documentary written evidence for everything, right? Like, and we know that tens of thousands of documents or more were destroyed, and that's if the documents even existed to begin with. So, there were lots of cases, and I talked to survivors who, had people had died, and there were no documents to be found. So the TRC was kind of in that funny situation where they did need to have a bit of a paper trail to make, or else what would happen? I mean, the sort of the right of center redneck would then accuse the TRC of exaggerating, right? So they had to play a bit conservative and make sure that they had the facts and figures to back up their claims. And Commissioner Sinclair had said a number of times that he thought the figure was quite a bit higher, maybe double. I think he said even triple the number that they found. It's just that they didn't have the paperwork and they didn't have the money to go and find all the evidence. And that's the real tragedy of it. I mean, the infrastructure was in place. Had the Harper government been willing to put more money into this, they would have found a lot more people, and we'd have a different death toll. I'm not saying they did it perfectly, but I mean, there was a lot of scope. Had the government been willing to help out more with the money, it would have been much better.
Yeah. That makes sense. That you kind of need to have your ducks in a row, especially if you're talking about murdered kids or missing kids. It's got to be well documented. Yeah.
Yeah, but Harper didn't. I mean, they didn't want to find a whole bunch of kids. They weren't.
Yeah.
They wanted this whole thing to go away, and Harper said so. I mean, he said stuff to the effect that the apology was kind of, that was it. He didn't want to cooperate with the TRC. He wanted them to go away. So. There's people that are critical of it and they say it didn't go far enough. But I mean, as far as Harper was concerned, it was going way too far and they were meddling in places they shouldn't be meddling. And the TRC staff and commissioners knew that. They pushed as far as they could push, but they didn't ultimately push everywhere, but I think they did a pretty good job. Yeah.
What's it like for you now? Like, because your book came out in 2019, and then last year and this year, I guess, really not too long after your book, it kind of exploded in the media and the news with finding more unmarked graves. That must have been interesting from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm obviously still publishing on these topics and doing a lot of interviews about it. So I think it confirms more of the kinds of things that I've been saying. But I mean, nothing I'm saying is all that original. I mean, this is all stuff that survivors and Indigenous institutions have been saying for ages. So it's just putting it in a form that some people will read that they might not read if it's a survivor testimony or something else. So I don't claim to be dazzlingly original in the book, but I do claim maybe to put it out in such a way that it's accessible for people that might not otherwise look at the material. But yeah, I keep publishing. I mean, there's a Royal Commission on Abuse and Care here in New Zealand that is looking at some similar kinds of things to what the TRC looked at, and which is Indigenous kids mainly being taken from their families and communities and taken away, and then losing their contact with their culture and their language and everything else. So I guess what I'm taking away from all this is that this is it's a much bigger issue than just a Canadian issue. It's something that happened around the world. You can go to another hemisphere and you're still going to find similar patterns. That's the crazy thing about it.
Yeah, we had a guy from Australia on who was looking into the near cool, I think is the school that's near cool, and they had a bunch of kids
I don't know it
from the UK go over there, and it was very similar to what was happening with the residential schools here, and it really does smack of like more of a global kind of Catholic Church type problem, and the governments as well. But
yeah, well, I mean the problem of the Catholic Church is a whole big can of worms, and I mean it's because you've got global networks of perpetrators. I mean, they're moving these people around. They they do horrible crimes in one country and then they're moved to another country, or and there's so it's pretty horrible stuff, and we're getting more to the truth of it. But it's really, I think it's just the beginning of really getting into what large organizations like the Catholic Church have been up to, because they've been very good at shielding their people from public scrutiny for a long time.
Yeah.
They seem to be organizationally
to
set up in such a way that it's hard to dig into them or get past. You can take down like one institution, but you can't go any further than that. The way they're sort of each set up as its own private.
Well, didn't the Catholic Church refuse to apologize?
The Pope did. Is that the Catholic Church?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it. If you look at the settlement agreement for the residential schools, it's the Catholic entities. So each, I think each diocese, the bishop is like the CEO of a corporation, and so I can't remember how many Catholic entities there are in Canada, but quite a few, and they're all separate. So if one goes bankrupt, the rest remain. Like it doesn't affect the others financially. So while they're very hierarchical, they're also, as you say, like really spread out in terms of the liability issue. Makes it really, really difficult to get information, and also to find a larger institution liable for what happened.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, is there any evidence? It's we kind of talk about it on on reserve that the residential schools out west were a lot worse than the ones in, like, say, Quebec and Ontario. Is there any evidence of that? Like, were there more deaths out there or worse treatment?
Well, anecdotally, I have heard that the ones in BC were the worst, and part of it was because they kept, if the teachers or staff were particularly bad, they just kept moving them west until they couldn't go any further west. So that's what I've heard. But that's just an anecdote. But so yeah, it could be true. I've heard some pretty horrible stories about residential schools in Ontario, though. Some pretty bad ones from Manitoba and certainly from Saskatchewan, which seem to be as bad as the BC ones. But I have heard there was a concentration of really bad things going on in the BC schools, like just the sheer number of schools and the number of I guess you'd say perpetrators in those schools was higher. But I don't have any evidence of that. Just things I've heard.
It's hard to wrap your head around. Like I think the narrative has been so mixed up over the years. Like even when I'd heard about residential schools, but it takes years of sort of learning about it to really wrap your head around what's happened. Like I just think for normal people, it's going to take a while for them to understand really how bad it really was. Like it's hard to even imagine, that the global Catholic network and what was happening in these residential schools all over the world, or not all over, but I mean, at least, Australia, New Zealand here. I mean, it's just hard to fathom. It's not too long ago, where I grew up in the 80s thinking that, I grew up in the 80s thinking, there's no more wars and no more racism. But I mean, it wasn't too long ago. It was only a couple decades ago.
Yeah. And kids are still being taken now. Right. So it's not like any of this is like fully over. I mean, there's still kids being taken from their moms all the time and put into care of various sorts. So, these problems are still going on. And I think, I guess my point would be that it's the government's role they're going to have to lead the way with this. A lot of their voters are they won't really understand what happened. And they might not care enough to be willing for the government to do something, but it's going to take some more leadership than what we've seen they're going to just have to lead the way, and then people will wake up and say, these positive changes have happened for Indigenous peoples. I guess that's okay. I can live with that. My taxes haven't gone up. Okay, whatever. I'll just go back to my job. And like, this is kind of how a lot of the civil rights stuff in the U.S. happened. The government would just do stuff, and like Seymour Hersh, who is a well-known journalist, writes a lot about, and what's his name now? There's another guy, Howard Zinn, writes about being around in the South during the civil rights era, and stuff was just desegregated, and people would be against desegregation, but once it happened, they were just like, well, it's not worth my energy to fight the new system, so I'm just going to put up with it. And ultimately, and that's the sad truth, the governments have got to step up and they've got to change things, and the voters will probably just go along with it, if they don't see any material disadvantage to their lives. So
yeah.
But the government can't keep going chasing after polls all the time. It's got to step up and do the right thing.
Yeah.
And they'll probably find that most people either will support it or they won't care enough to vote for the other party, And but it does take a bit of courage and some leadership to make these things happen.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? How you reference conciliation versus reconciliation in your book?
Yeah. Well, I use the term conciliation because I don't know if there's ever been this period of reconciliation between settlers and Indigenous peoples. I mean, there probably has been in some cases, but I think it's a misnomer. I mean, it implies that there was some golden age when everyone got along great and then things went badly. But the problem of that myth of the golden age is that it's Indigenous peoples handing over the land to the settlers. So part of that golden age is about land, is about willing surrender of land, which I don't. There's nothing I've ever read or heard that suggests that that's true. So that's part of the reason that I think conciliation is a better word, because I think the term reconciliation was attractive for the people that did the settlement agreement because of South Africa and other places. Like, people know what a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is in Canada. If you start using other words and concepts, then you might lose people. But so it makes sense that the term was used that way. But I just don't think it's 100% accurate in the Canadian case. That's all.
Did you come across the missing women at all in your research? Like, that still seem to be happening in northern Canada and some of the provinces?
Yeah, I mean, I came across it when I was doing my research, but it wasn't really an area I was looking at, because the area I was looking at was so big anyway that I just basically looked at a section of everything that I could talk about and do within the size of a book, and I focused on that. But yeah, that was certainly something I was thinking about too, and because most of my research collaborators are Indigenous women, and so I've heard lots of stories, and I definitely know about things that have happened and are happening.
Do you know anybody that's doing that research that we could get I think Darren, weren't you trying to find somebody to talk to about that too?
Yes.
Yeah. If you know of anybody, let us know. Who's
I'll do that.
Research. Yeah.
I mean, there's someone at Guelph, Myrna Dawson, who runs a center which is, I think it's called the Femicide Center at Guelph. I think she's a Canada Research Chair. Last name is Dawson, Myrna Dawson. Okay. And she's done a lot of work in that space for a long time, so she might be someone to talk to. It's not, as I say, like this is a huge. There's so much to know, and to do everything is it's impossible. So I mean, I know a certain amount of things, but I don't know enough to call myself any kind of a really knowledgeable academic type of person on those things.
Yeah, it's just another one of those things that deserves more attention. It's right in our backyard, so it's
that's right.
It's crazy that it's still happening.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and
You mentioned some horror stories out of Manitoba and Ontario. Would you be willing to share some of those with us?
I seem to be running out of power. I'm down to 5%. I'm not sure what to do because I'm plugged into the thing that I need to charge my iPad. Yeah, I guess I got 5% power. I don't know. I mean, I've put some stuff into the book. I can't really share anything more because I interviewed survivors. I did transcripts. I was bound by research ethics approval, and then whatever I put in the book, I got the permission of the survivors. So I can't really comment more on stuff that I heard that isn't in the book because it's not cleared for research ethics. But I mean, generally there was just a lot of stories of abuse, but just people being very badly treated, being made to make really horrible decisions where all the outcomes were bad decisions. Just put in situations where no one should ever be put in. And then there was like I talk in the book about one. I mean, just really bad stuff. So there's stuff in the book that you could look at. But I mean, the survivors' stories in the TRC volume are full of things that that are pretty horrible. And the survivor memoirs as well. There's quite a few of those too. So there's nothing else I could really share, I don't think.
Before you run out of percent, what were some of the solutions you were recommending?
Well, one of the big ones was land. So, I mean, I think the land base has to be restored. I mean, most of the land is still Crown land, so we need to figure out how to get that land back to Indigenous peoples and governments. I think the land issue is central. Making forcible transfer illegal under the criminal code because the full genocide convention still isn't in our criminal code, and that wasn't a TRC recommendation, but it should have been. There are a number of ones off the top of my head. I'm kind of drawing a blank as to exactly what I recommended, but most of it had to do with promoting Indigenous self-determination and the return of land. It also has to do with an awareness that genocide is about destroying governments. That, as a political scientist, I'm interested in how Indigenous governments were also targeted and destroyed. I mean, it's not just about people, but it's about governments that have functioned successfully for thousands of years, and then you come in and you destroy the governments along with those people, and then all the infrastructure that supports them. And that's something that, like, as people that study politics, we don't look at that much. We don't think of Indigenous peoples having successful governments over thousands of years. But that ultimately is what happened. I mean, foreign governments came in and forcibly replaced Indigenous governments, and can still continue to do that. So, part of reversing this process then is about trying to restore those kinds of governments, so that and so that we're not, as settlers, tempted to create institutions which are going to continue to roll over Indigenous governments again.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, they just take away the whole infrastructure, and then from then on, it's easier to assimilate, or destroy the culture completely.
Yeah. That's one of the areas where I've been looking at a lot, and I guess the issue I question is, if they give us that to allow us to choose our own form of government, would they recognize a government that's not democratic?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. The answer is probably they wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, can you get to a point where they don't have the power to make that determination without looking like they're overtly colonizing people? So, and maybe that's the leverage that the UN declaration, the UNDRIP, can provide. In other countries, people are hoping so, that it will. When you talk about the right to self-determination in the declaration, it can give you the leverage to say, this is our kind of government, and we're going to do things our way. I mean, it shouldn't be a whole laundry list of things that the Canadian government decides is legitimate or not. It's about that legitimacy coming from within the Indigenous communities, that they decide what the government is. So yeah, I'm just saying that the declaration might be able to provide some leverage. I think some of the discussion of genocide, which I do in the book, is also designed to help Indigenous peoples to have a bit more leverage as well. Like if it's useful to promoting political goals, then I'm totally behind that. And I think that's part of the reason I wrote the book. It may be helpful to some people to leverage further self-determination from the government. I don't know if it will be or not, but if it is, then that would be good.
Yeah, I think it's because we have a lot of, both from the Indigenous perspective, but also plenty of modern examples of when a democracy is forced upon a people, that doesn't tend to work out very well.
No, it doesn't. Because democracy itself doesn't work out that well. I mean,
yeah,
it's the numbers are terrible. I mean, the number of people that voted for the Liberals is small, and you look at here. Like, I'm a permanent resident in New Zealand. I can vote in every election, but you've got a huge disenfranchised population of permanent residents paying taxes, sending their kids to school. They can't even vote for the school board. They can't vote for provincial MPPs. They can't vote for anybody. They're just there to make money and pay taxes, and they have no say in government either. So, it's not a perfect system by any means. And there's lots of first past the post could have been abolished by Trudeau as well, but he decided to play a cynical game and not even look at a proportional system. So, yeah, there's lots of things that are wrong with our democracy for sure.
We're better off with the monarch. Where can people get the book?
Well, I think you can get it on the University of Toronto Press site. I mean, I don't know, like Barnes and Noble, Amazon, like it's just kind of everywhere. The Good Minds Bookshop in Brantford has got it. Most of like your local bookshops, if they don't have it on the shelf because it's now a bit old, they can order it in. But if you go to the U of T website, it was like $15 for a while there, and then you can get an e-copy for probably about $9 or $10. Yeah. Now I got a problem because I'm down to 2%. So
that's okay.
Sign off. But
we can wrap this up. Do you have a website or anything like that you want to give out?
So my website is where the heck is it now? I'll just send a message to myself. It's davidbmacdonald.com. So not David MacDonald, but davidbmacdonald.com.
No relation to John A.
Not A. Yeah. And you can, a lot of my articles, a lot of my published work is up there. So there's like lots of PDFs if people want to download stuff. And anyone wants any, my publications or anything, they can email me and I'll try to sort it out. I generally do send copies of my book to survivors if they want them. So I think I sent like 14 copies one time to somewhere in Ontario. So if there are survivors that want a copy and they can't afford it or something, I can arrange to have them get one if it's helpful. But thanks, it should be easy to get the book. That's what I hear.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks. We'll put all that in the show notes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Yeah.
Right
nice
on.
talking to you all.
Thank you.
And
enjoy your dinner.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye
now.
Bye.
And that was our chat with Professor
David
MacDonald. Professor David MacDonald. What do you think, buddy?
I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one.
I like that.
Would have been nice if it was a little longer, but he ran out of battery, so I don't know if this was a bonus.
I think we covered everything anyways, pretty much from the book anyway. So.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So big thanks to you guys for being Plus supporters, for sticking with us. This is what we do for you guys. We podcast through COVID so that you guys don't miss any content. If anything, you get extra content. And we have an extra Indian.
You're welcome.
For now, anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say when I was talking about the indigenous natives. I was like, I don't know what word to use.
engine.
And did you catch my hesitation there?
Yeah.
I thought
indigenous. I don't know.
I just thought you were getting ready to cough again. So
Yeah.
I just I mean,
You're
I
not
don't
coughing.
know if Darren can say Indian. I don't know if I can.
You can't.
Especially with a professor of political science. I didn't want to offend him or anything.
Or yourself. You want to make an ass of yourself, Dunlap.
All right, guys.
We love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week. Hopefully, Graham will be COVID free.
and hopefully you.
I'll probably just be getting it by then.
I'm the new Lord Savior.
I am your president. I am your vice president. I am your Condoleezza Rice.
No one has ever heard a word as dirty as the word. Politics, rhetoric written in some self-proclaimed prophecy. Imaginary lines, twisted and tangled with a handshake with a signature and some policy papers behind enemy lines. Tension builds, a cell phone rings, a bomb drops in a city street sea of iPod noise. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. If the digital revolution still got a pulse, we need to revive it and make it a reality. I've hacked into a politician's password and transferred money into several overseas accounts. And as we speak, a supercomputer project is in the works. And if it works, we'll use it to point and click our way to some sort of truth. Either you're in or out, are you game, or is the game over? This must be a glitch in the Matrix. This must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. It's me versus the machine. Go! Watch out for them laser beams. Climb to the top of the pyramid scheme. Capitol Hill's getting steeper and steeper. Meanwhile, the deck gets deeper and deeper. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Cause it's gonna take more than hand and eye coordination on your PlayStation. It's gonna take mind elevation. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. It's me versus the machine. Go! Breaking from my routine, I dive into my computer screen. Swimming in a sea of zeros and ones. Trying to put together two and two, but I keep getting blind. Trying to weed through all the lines from the bad guys in the suits and the neckties. Help me find the oracle. She has the answer. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. Rage against the machine. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Rage against